Hi, what's going on, everyone? It's David Palmer, the Leo King, and Dr. Ann Wolke here for History in the Stars on highvibe.tv. Glad to have you with us today. If you're not part of highvibe.tv, make sure that you check us out on highvibe.tv or all of our apps, Roku, Apple TV, Android, and iPhone. This is a series that Ann and I have been doing for, almost 2 years now. And today we're going to be talking about Edgar Allan Poe. And it's good to have you help me understand this and the audience, because I'm going to be honest, I don't know much about Edgar Allan Poe.
You don't know much about Edgar Allan Poe, but you bought this wonderful collection here. So
I'm a moon in Taurus. I'm going to buy expensive, rare books and put them in my thing, and I'm going to look at them, and then I have you, the history professor, here to help me understand it better. And all of us, we're so blessed to have you on iVibe.
I'm blessed to have you help me understand the astrology for all this crazy history.
Yeah, it's going to be kind of wild. I mean, I would love for you to take the floor here about these books, because I bought these books, and I'll be honest with you, I just bought them because I'm like, oh, it was very rare, and it's Edgar Allan Poe, and oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I was thinking that you must have been some sort of Edgar Allan Poe super fan yourself, that you got these wonderful volumes. And I think you're able to show close-ups on here, right? Because I was looking up information. Actually, when you got this, I don't remember what else you got. You got another book at the same time that is sort of in the field of history that I study. And I should have been most interested in that. But I loved these books. So it's like a 2-volume collection for everybody that was printed in 1849, the year that Edgar Allan Poe mysteriously died. And what's really cool about them is that they have somebody's press clippings that they pasted in the collection, right? So there's like a house that Poe lived in.
I mean, that's the reason why I bought this book. Well, I guess it's 2 volumes, but that it's a one of a kind, because whoever owned this book was, I would say, a little obsessed.
They were obsessed, and then they followed his career after this. So I was telling you before this all started that you have like a really special, rare first edition of this, the collection of prose tales, where on the cover page, or title page, I mean, his middle name is, actually it's not middle name, is one of his last names is misspelled.
Right, so it's spelled with A-L-L-E-N, and he's A-L-L-A-N.
Right.
And don't think every publisher is posting the truth all the time. Even back then.
Well, especially back then.
Who are these guys? Maybe they're still around. W.J. Whittleton, publisher, New York.
Yeah.
Good job.
W.J. Whittleton also, as their publisher, were really profiting off of Edgar Allan Poe's work by creating this collection and sort of taking the rights to all of his work for themselves and making lots of money off of it.
I think also, if you turn the page, they have a picture of his tombstone.
Is it on this one? I think it's another one.
Oh, look at that picture, though. That's not part of the book. That's like...
No, they added this picture.
Somebody added that.
Yeah,
that's what I was
on
like...
the other pages.
I feel like I'm like... It's like Sherlock Holmesy, like kind of like weird...
It is.
Like the way it's like somebody like, here, I'm going to put all these pictures and put all these little clippings. Like, what is this clipping about? Like the portrait of Poe, which is blah, 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 blah.
Tells you all about how he was 19 when that was done. And I think they say it was taken in London, or I mean, it was created in London or somewhere in Europe when he was traveling there. At the age of 19, after he had left West Point Academy because he didn't like it very much, and he was court-martialed.
Wow, it sounds like my life.
Exactly. I couldn't believe that when I was, reading all about that. He went to the University of Virginia when he was 18, lasted a year there, but he was gambling and maybe drinking a lot and had all sorts of debts.
Look, it looks like he's drunk there.
It does. Well, this is his statue. right? So this is a statue of him that was put up, I think, in the Bronx.
I would be very unhappy with my life if I left my legacy and that was my statue.
Yeah, well, he's looking like he's thinking deep in thought, and
I mean,
think there's even a raven down
we're going
the
to throw a
bottom.
little astrology in. So he's a 28-degree Capricorn. It looks very Kronos. Doesn't it? That looks
It
like
does.
Kronos, how he's leaning down like, I'm ready to eat a baby. Babies.
Oh, it doesn't.
This
really
week,
look
everything
like
for
him.
Boston Powers, the spy that shagged me just keeps coming up. Like, fat bastard. Just like, make sure they get the baby.
Well, I think he had Scottish ancestry, so yeah,
Oh,
maybe
okay.
that would connect to him.
But that's what's interesting too about the timing. So this book was published in 1849.
Mm-hmm.
That was also the year he died, if I'm correct, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And in 1849, we had just discovered Neptune. It was actually discovered in 1846 to 48. There was two different people who were battling and who discovered Neptune. But, by 1848, it was established that Neptune was a planet. And it also had entered into Pisces, ironically enough. So it was found when it had entered into Pisces. So this was it's very Piscean, just looking at this weird newspaper clipping of his statue, or I guess that's what, like a statue of him.
Mm-hmm.
And then looking at his middle name being misspelled. I just think it's so Neptunian.
Well,
in
I
Pisces.
think so. Neptune was in Pisces then. I'm going to turn this
Yes.
because it wants to stay open there. Neptune was in Pisces when he died then, huh?
Correct, yes.
So we're kind of starting at the end of his life here, but maybe we should like rewind and talk about the beginning and then come back to that,
Yeah, please.
because that's super fascinating. But he was born in I gave you the birth date, or you have the birth date, January.
Yeah, he was born in Boston,
January 19th,
1809.
1809.
And we don't know his birth time exactly because the Rodham report's saying a C,
Mm-hmm.
which means, there's not conflicting birth times out there, but there is no established birth time.
Right.
And you actually brought it up to me before this. You said, I think they put him as a Scorpio rising just because it's very Scorpionic, his life. But
Yeah, but with the North Node there, doesn't it make sense a little bit too? I don't
with
know.
Uranus, yeah.
Yeah, since the last time we did this show, I've learned a lot more about astrology now, so I know some things. But
Yeah, I mean, I feel that he has North Node Uranus conjunct in Scorpio. He's got a ton of Pisces with his Moon, Pluto, Jupiter, and Venus in Pisces, all dead conjunct, like within the matter. It's like the tightest orb. So, I mean, he's a lot of water, and then he's this Capricorn with the Sun and Mercury. It's a very... You know who else was very like this, although they had the Cancer, was Robin Williams, had a lot of water going on like that.
wow.
And, he obviously expressed himself very extremely, through poems, and these are his stories, correct, these books?
Yeah, the prose stories. So this is all of those famous stories he's known for, like the Murders in the Rue Morgue, and everything that are the stories that were influential, like in detective fiction and for science fiction even. He really was very gothic and graphic in the way that he wrote. So I like
Is that how he was raised? Like, how did he get to that place?
That's a good question. I was wondering that myself, because he actually, what's funny is that he was the son of actors who lived in Boston. The Poes were actors, but they both died. And then he was raised by a local wealthy couple who kind of took him in and were very nice to him and brought him into the family. So they were the Allans. So that's where he got that part of his name.
Well, maybe that's why somebody rectified this chart for the fourth house with his Moon, Pluto, Venus, stellium with Jupiter, because he's got Moon and Pluto dead conjunct, if this is the chart, with Venus and Pluto. But we know for sure Venus, Pluto dead conjunct. We know for sure on the day that he was born as well, North Node Uranus within a degree. He also has Saturn and Neptune conjunct in Sag.
So they're both in Sagittarius there.
Correct. And what's interesting about that alignment, especially because it's in hard squares to his moon, to his Pluto, and his Venus, and his Jupiter. So he's born on a Saturn square Jupiter year. He's born on a Neptune square Jupiter year. He's born on a Pluto square Neptune. He's got a lot of hard Neptune aspects. And then he's got Saturn on Neptune, which Saturn and Sag is already pretty easy going, actually. I think that's the easiest place, in my opinion, for Saturn. But with Neptune there, Neptune's not feeling that supported at all. And Neptune especially is ironic that he dies as Neptune's coming into being found, and also which kind of creates the craziness for him in his life. And he does have a lot of great trines to Uranus, though, in the North Node. So he's an oddball that's kind of isolated in his own, not Aquarian way, but Piscean way, like his emotional way, or almost kind of feeling like he's been kind of given like a bad hand at the table by God.
And he was kind of, because he was very poetic by nature. I mean, that's what he loved to do. And his adopted father didn't want him to pursue poetry as a career. So he went to the University of Virginia, like I said, and it was brand new still then. That's the university founded by Thomas Jefferson. And it was founded to be like an experimental sort of university where students got to choose their own path, right? And he actually took Italian, and I was reading that he read and translated Dante. Dante's, the Divine Comedy. So I read a whole article of them trying to decipher, did he really read Purgatory or not? Because some of the things that they said, that he said about it, aren't correct, but he definitely read Inferno. And he talks about it.
And he just gets stuck almost down there, doesn't read Paradiso?
I don't think so. They didn't talk about it, but maybe he did. But I think they were talking about, they were looking at it because there's some parallels with the, like his big love of his life. They made parallels to Beatrice, Dante's Beatrice, and his Virginia, who happened to be also his first cousin that he married. And
he's got Venus Pluto moon conjunct there in Pisces. A little bit like, oh, you're my cousin. Oh, you look real good.
That was exactly it. He went to live with his aunt, and she was his little, and I mean little because she was probably 12 years old at the time when they moved in, or when he moved there, and she was his assistant for doing poetry stuff, like delivering things to editors and all of that. And then when she was almost 14, they got married. And I mean, that was normal for those times, it was a lot more normal for those times, but it's still a little young. And the first cousin thing, I don't think it was like super common. So
by that time, not really. From my family history, there's some people, one person in my tree who married a cousin. But that was more in the 1700s still, so
right.
I don't think by the 1800s that was like a normal thing.
This was the South. No, that was a joke.
I know, he was in Boston.
but no, he moved to, this family lived in Richmond, Virginia.
Oh.
So
he was he was in the purgatory of between places of the South and the North.
Yeah.
It's also interesting, he has Mars in Libra in the 12th house. Quincunx, that whole stellium in Pisces, like pretty much there. As Mars is 19 degrees of Libra, and he's got Jupiter there at about 16. Let's see. Yeah, Mars 18 and Jupiter 16. So he's got Mars, Jupiter, Quincunx, and then that Venus Pluto is at 9, and his Pluto is 13.
So the other thing about that Venus Pluto thing is that Virginia died when she was, I can't remember the age, when she was pretty young, and she died of tuberculosis, and he never got over that. You know, he did end up going back to his previous fiancée because she was widowed. He definitely knew how to cultivate women, and he always...
It doesn't sound like, I don't think he was cultivating women. I think he was cultivating whatever was around.
Why would you say that?
Because just that story, and keep going back to the ex-fiance,
right?
And then the first cousin, and then I mean, what's around, and then especially with this Venus-Pluto people can be, they're kind of addicted to the tragedy story of relationships, and they kind of also pick partners that they already know the tragedy is going to happen, and they kind of get off on that a little bit.
Wow.
And especially if it's in Pisces, where Venus is exalted, but he still got a Saturn square to that. He's still got a Neptune square to that. And with Jupiter as well, you have Jupiter and Venus. Both are awesome there in Pisces. But Saturn squaring it, and then, he's got a lot that Venus-Pluto energy can, with the moon too, that's like over-obsessive and very... he created poems and he created stories, but he's creating his own internalized, especially with the trines to Uranus. He doesn't care going his own way, but at the same time, the squares to Sag are kind of like, there's more out there, buddy.
Wow.
Imagine if you grew up in a little room and you were never allowed to leave, and cockroaches came around. I mean, it's almost kind of like, look at the I like this cockroach.
Oh,
it's like,
no.
Let's open the door and get you out into the world. There's other people.
Well, he definitely wanted to get out in the world. I mean, there's so much about what you're saying that I want to go into about his personality and about what we know about him. But so when he was 18 and he quit at UVA, and I know 18 is like an important age astrologically,
the nodal return,
right?
yeah.
That was when he decided he wanted to join the military. So he enlisted in the Army went into West Point, and he lied and said he was 22, right? Did whatever it took to get in, and then 8 months later is when he got
Did he go
kicked
AWOL?
out. Well, he did like to drink, and he did like to gamble, and that was a problem. So basically, I guess for
that was
his era,
a popular time for that, though.
Yeah, but he overdid it. I mean, people gambled, but you had to have money to be able to pay your debts, and he didn't.
That was a weird time, because if he's born in 1809, right? So he would have been 1828 to be in, 1812. The War of 1812 had been done. The U.S. military would have been in a very building block place, learning. It's not like we were traveling around in ships everywhere, and then we weren't invested in a lot of countries then.
Right.
And we didn't even have all of them, we weren't even west fully yet. You know what I mean? Like, the Alamo hadn't happened yet. Like the gold rush hadn't happened yet. So there, Lewis and Clark hadn't really made their. What year was that?
I was just thinking, what year are Lewis and Clark?
Yeah,
was it like 1818 though, or maybe later? I don't remember.
Well, not only was the trip of Lewis and Clark a long one, right? But it was also to get that information back and then get it out to the public. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, let's start reading about what a beaver is.
Oh, it was from 1803 to September 1806.
Oh, so that had happened.
So it had already happened, yeah. Yeah.
Well, maybe that, it's kind of interesting.
But that happened before him, or, while he was, right before he was born.
Yeah, it would have. But it's kind of interesting looking at the territories at that time when he was born. Like the Louisiana Purchase had happened. But the military was not. Again, they had to go fight the Spanish War. And also, there was all that territory that was Spanish territory. So he would have been at a time where it's like there's Reconstruction that's not even happened yet, or the Civil War hadn't happened yet. But the U.S. military would have been definitely not playing around with drunks.
No. Yeah,
which really was one of the peak pinnacles of American history of the 1850s when he died.
Mm-hmm.
But like, was that morning, noon, and night you had cider at your house and you drank. Everybody was drinking. And the Germans hadn't come over yet and built their pubs yet and breweries that were around yet. But that would have been during a time where people were going to start to go west and start, being cowboys and start drinking at saloons. But it's almost like I feel like he was just not born in a time. He's very North Node Uranus and Scorpio, like.
He definitely was.
Like having to search for his uniqueness and try and stir things up, because it would have been a very weird time in America. It was a little lost.
Andrew Jackson would have been president, right, in 1829, part of that year.
Well, it was 1820's election of Monroe that there was no other candidate that ran against him. So when he went into the election of that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, the Federalist Party didn't have a candidate. He was a Democratic Republican. So then that was a weird moment of where the Federalist Party leaves. Then the Whig Party is going with things, and then there's this Democrat-Republican Party, and then they become starting Democrats, right? Like more. And that's the split that starts happening.
So it's an interesting time politically.
Yes, especially if he was born with Jupiter square Saturn. That's the moment, right? Because he's 1809 from who was the 1800 election was the weird one where it was what's his name, Thomas Jefferson, that had Aaron Burr in 1800. So it would have been that weird 1804, right before he was born, that Aaron Burr shot the vice president that was running against them, and then we got to get rid of Aaron Burr. And so what a weird moment in American history. And then the War of 1812 comes after that.
It's a really weird time in general, like a shift to something new for the United States, or maybe finally a breaking away from what it had been as a formerly British colony.
Right.
Because the other thing with Edgar Allan Poe is he really did not like the transcendentalists who were all about tranquility and going out into nature and communing with the natural world and finding peace and solitude.
So he didn't like.
No, you
he
put
did
it.
not like Emerson's works.
You put him on the bookshelf next to him. Actually,
That's
Emerson was a little later, but Emerson did not like Edgar Allan Poe, because Edgar Allan Poe was.
I put them right next to each other.
Well, I mean, in Monticello, Thomas Jefferson has Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr facing off in his entryway. So, I mean, you just have to remind them of how they each helped shape something new. Because really it would be between the dialogue between those two ideas that creates something new, in my opinion, right? But Edgar Allan Poe's new kind of writing style was that really graphic, gothic horror fiction that really was psychological, right? Really before there was psychology. It was getting in the mind of the killer. It was talking about like the nervous system and what it would feel like to be the murderer or the victim, right? So it was all about the personal experience of death. Super opposite of Emerson, right? And all about the divine nature. So
well, that describes all that Pisces, Jupiter, Pluto conjunct, Venus conjunct the moon, and trine Uranus and Scorpio with the North Node. I mean, that's very psychologically embedding and talking about the nerves and the nervous system is Uranian. So it's kind of interesting, though. I feel like he was healing his own traumas through his writing. I don't think he would like a transcendentalist, because it's almost like that's actually a healing process and finding the divinity in a more like letting go and like connecting with the divine, opposed to kind of like, again, I feel like he felt like he was a piece of trash that was thrown on the side of a street in Boston or something.
Yeah, I can
and
see
ended
that.
up in Virginia.
Right. But he was in Virginia and found Virginia there. But then she died, actually 2 years before his death. So he was also so much older than her. I think she was 24 when she died. And by that time, he was an editor for magazines, and he was editing collections of poetry for people. So he was actually working. But he kind of lost it when his wife died, and he kind of roamed around for a few years. And people have, like, the typical story of Edgar Allan Poe is that he wandered around drunk, right? That he was an alcoholic. And people have definitely said he was an alcoholic, but he also tried very much. Why would you do that face, David?
I mean,
what is it?
Moon, Venus, Pluto, Jupiter, and Pisces, and a stellium conjunct
Right.
with Neptune squares. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So what was interesting about him, though, is that he and his I can't remember another relative could drink very little. Like, they would drink a glass of wine and be totally drunk and stumbling around. So if he ever abused that, he would get extra drunk, and he would go between these times of not drinking at all, right? Abstinence. And at the end of his life, he actually joined a temperance society. And so when he died, they insisted, no, he hadn't been drinking. Of course he wasn't drinking. He was a member of our society. But a lot of other people said he'd been drinking a lot around that time.
I was going to say, based off this chart, it's like the sloppiest drunk you could get.
Yeah, he had to go around apologizing to people. You know, after he would say, okay, I quit drinking, but then I've got to go to this party, and the hostess offered me a drink. So, of course, I had to drink because it would be rude to not drink, right?
This makes so much sense to me of like why I've never connected with Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah.
Spiritually, I just have always been like, nah. It makes so much sense now looking at his chart. And he's a 28-degree Capricorn on America's Pluto, which we're about to have that Pluto return in 2022 here. Actually, at the end of this year. But there's something about him that, especially how, I don't know, not that I glorify Emerson or anything, but I'm a spiritual person, and I'm about spirituality. Of course, I'm down for the Scorpio life. I got Mars and Saturn in Scorpio. I'm down for the edge. But I'm also like for finding the light too. And and I feel like with him, it's almost like that's where he had lots of battles internally. And it's like he's expressing that in his stories and his darker poems. And also, you know, Jupiter, Pluto people like Bill Gates, right, has Jupiter, Pluto, right? Like he has his in Leo though. They call that the billionaires aspect. But to him, it's like, yeah, I guess his name lives on and his work lives on. But he had it in Pisces, so it wasn't like it was materially as maybe as good as like Bill Gates and Leo. But Jupiter, Pluto people can be big piece of shits.
So maybe he was.
I'm just using the example of Bill Gates,
right?
You know what I mean? Like not like Billy Boy's
I think
really doing the nicest things to people and thinks he can control everybody and that he understands. And I know what's best for everybody. Like who did he hang around with, Edgar Allan Poe? Do you know? Because Bill Gates hung around Epstein. And Epstein wanted to invest and put all the DNA into everybody, his own DNA in everybody. Oh, I wonder what's in the shot.
Oh, no. Well, Edgar Allan Poe would have hung out with a lot of editors and publishers and poets. And the funny thing is that one of the big mysteries about Edgar Allan Poe is was he addicted to opium? Because he wrote an article about opium. And did he drink absinthe? And people who are really into Edgar Allan Poe really are into that aspect of him as well, right? Because what he wrote, people think, okay, well, he had to have been on opium if he wrote that, right? But he himself actually wrote about opium to people he knew, saying that he didn't do it. I think he was more of an alcoholic, right? He was more of a drinker.
Oh no, they're both depressants. They are both downers. And looking at a statue at the beginning, I said, "Look at that! He looks drunk. Actually, looks like he's on opium. Like can't even stand up. Like what you see on people on opium or you see on heroin and stuff is they do the not like." It would have been like, "Hey, Edgar."
No.
And then like, you know what's kind of, this might sound crazy, but I don't think that the people who have their visions of what he would have been like are actually crazy. I actually believe them based off this chart.
Right. Well, even, I don't know how many years, for many years, every day on the anniversary of, I think it's his birth, maybe it was his death, somebody would mysteriously bring bourbon, or people will know what alcohol it was, like bourbon or something, to his grave. And then is there something in there about
I was
that?
going to look at the grave picture and be like, maybe I can.
But so somebody mysteriously would do that, and now we know who it was. It was somebody from a church near there, from one of the local churches, would bring his favorite alcohol to the grave, or cognac maybe, I don't remember, and leave it there mysteriously every year. And that stopped in 2009, I think. But opium, though, at this time, it would have been really kind of the peak of use of
Yeah, was he hanging out in San Francisco?
Well, it was everywhere.
I know. San Francisco, though, became the opium dens, but that was more after the gold rush started. But
and opium,
and that was very Neptune and Pisces, actually. That whole transit was San Francisco opium. Go look at San Francisco today. It's a piece of shit with a bunch of fucking drugs everywhere and people on the streets doing drugs. Just how it was with the Chinese opium dens.
Right. I mean, and the British were profiting off of that, manufacturing opium.
Yeah, San Francisco,
and then
wake up.
forcing China to buy it. And there were wars fought over it in the 1850s later. So at this time, it would have been used as in all sorts of medicines. It was used in children's or babies' teething medicine.
Right.
You know, it was horrible because people also could OD very easily, and there were a lot of efforts to regulate it in Britain. I mean, I know the British history more than the American.
Right.
So it's kind of one of the first drugs that was really regulated, like the pharmaceutical, like statutes had to come about in order to regulate people's use of opium.
Knowing that his birthday, and then knowing that when you brought up earlier kind of that it really was like a breakaway of fully the American way and the British way because of the War of 1812.
Right.
That I almost feel like he was kind of trying to embody what Americans at that time were trying to do, and especially in North Node to Uranus person, like trying to really be the outcast, the different one, and especially in Scorpio. And if he does have a Scorpio rising, from what Astros.com is saying, and actually I was able to see who did that Rodden, which is an astro deistist person. It's probably really close. And I would say that, Mars in the 12th, and especially with Scorpio rising, and he has Pluto conjunct that moon in Pisces and Venus, the ruler of his ascendant, I would say that guy is deeply held with secrets and would deeply lie about, oh, no, I didn't do opium, while he's doing opium.
All right. So, yeah. I mean, and they definitely know. This is the funny thing.
And he's a Capricorn.
So what, a Capricorn would lie about it, or
a Capricorn
would do
that
it?
has a plan.
Okay.
And wants to get wherever he wants to go. And it's in the third house, his sun and Mercury, dead conjunct. Yeah.
So it would be part of how he actually
I actually think that he was probably had a very intense mental disorder.
Right. And I would agree. I think definitely he did. And that he did take, I can never say it correctly, laudanum, which is an opiate. And
So he did take
it, but not,
it.
I mean, supposedly not regularly, you know?
Oh, man, I bet you they got plenty of bottles from the publisher. I gotta keep making those books for you, man. Okay, give me that bottle.
It's like you're channeling Edgar Allan Poe. Definitely, there's a lot of publishers trying to keep him going so they can profit off of him as well. But he himself was never wealthy because he probably drank and gambled it away, although he did go through those periods of time of like abstinence and then decadence, right?
Jupiter, Pluto, score Saturn, Neptune, yeah, for sure. I bet you he gambled it all and lost it all many times and then somehow was able to regain it back.
Right, and that's...
Which I would say he would be very bipolar.
Yeah.
Very manic and then very depressed. Very
right,
manic
and at
then
a time
depressed.
when they didn't really understand that, right?
Oh, yeah, correct, because it really wasn't until Carl Jung, which was the beginning of the 20th century, started doing the shadow work, and actually psychology itself started really blossoming after that work. There was others too, but really, like that period in time is when the idea of psychology really started. And the end of the 1880s, which he wasn't around for, was when it was like, let's just throw you in a fucking chair and throw some electricity up in your brain.
Right. And luckily he didn't have to get that done to him. But the picture, it's like when you look at the famous picture of him that Maya used on the no, she didn't use it. She was going to. I don't know if you can find the photograph of him. Every time I've looked at that, I've just thought it's really haunting. And it really does seem like a very troubled person to me when you look at his eyes. Somebody said, emo artist druggie trend in the chat. I was just checking out the High Vibe chat.
Are you talking about this one?
Yeah, that, like the first one on the left.
This one?
Mm-hmm.
We can post it up on the screen. Okay, so I'm trying to determine from his face if he's really a Scorpio rising or not, which usually has a more rounded face, like Pluto. Scorpio risings. And usually if they go bald, they would look like they were Pluto. Which I'm already like taking his hair away and see how his hair and his hairline's so high up. I would say that. And then when you look at him, you're already saying haunting and all that stuff. Like, would you make out with that mustache, Anne?
No.
Yeah.
I was just trying to think too while I was looking at that mustache. There was a story where he actually shaved his mustache to disguise himself. To like get away from trouble, right? So he was always hanging out with troublemakers. And of course, I guess as the Capricorn, making everyone think they were the ones doing all the drugs and he was totally clean. But he just hung out with them.
No, the Capricorn with the Mercury and Capricorn in the third would make up in his own head that he had control.
Oh.
Right? Like, I have control of this. But like emotionally, Pluto hiding it, and then with Venus there, like that guy would be in a corner by himself, like the same way probably fantasized about his cousin.
Well, it was also his wife, so he was allowed to fantasize about her.
First off, it was his cousin before it got to wife. That's not the route taken, you know what I mean?
Yes. Well, in any case.
With trying to North Node Uranus. I mean, I have South Node Uranus conjunct, so it'd be like me this life being like, well, fuck, I'm going to go take these stupid routes.
Well, what does North Node Uranus mean?
I mean, he's supposed to go take these unique routes, but it's about the inner transformation that he's supposed to go through, which I feel like he actually did by the end of his life by doing his work. So I'm not trying to put him down. I'm like having fun. But I think that what this work is that he did is he's transforming himself and he's finding his truth and he's actually bringing it out. And that was what his goal was. But with the South Node in Taurus, you know, you have to remember, like, the nodes, when the North is in Scorpio and the South is in Taurus, that's not a good alignment, right? Like, especially even in Vedic astrology, like, there's always going to be destruction and rebuilding, and there's going to be overly hoarding and not knowing when to let go and knowing when to move on and change and to go through your phoenix moments and rising through and transformational stuff. So he's like learning to be very scorpionic.
Mm-hmm.
And in many ways he is. And actually I feel like he does put it out there. Because the one thing about Scorpio, it's the learning of taking what's inside and to learn to bring it out. Opposed to hold it in. That's why Venus is at its detriment there. And that's why, you know, like Mars is actually at home there because it's learning about focusing and directing and bringing that power and using it for something. And also it's the house of receiving.
But he had Mars in Libra, huh? So he had those two.
Yeah, he had a
flipped.
detrimental Mars, but he had a lot of, you know, he had Jupiter and Venus together, and that would have been really awesome. But it was with his moon. He had Pluto. He had Sun, Mercury, Capricorn. I mean, his Mercury's combust, so I mean, it's kind of interesting though. It's in the third, so it kind of gets saved. But the real interesting part to me, bringing up the Scorpio stuff and the haunting picture, is like, did he write about ghosts in his stories? Or were they more psychologicals of human psychology going weird, which would have been his own?
Yeah, it's more.
That's really
okay.
what a Scorpio's truth is their own truth.
And he always. So here's what the biographers said about him after he died, right? Because right away people are trying to rehabilitate him and not let the truth get out about everything, right? Everything, the kind of stuff you're talking about. But they really emphasized the fact that he, I don't know how to even say it. I mean, sort of switching, like you asked, did he write about ghosts? More, he wrote about the mind of the killer, the mind of the victim, right? Getting inside the body of the person who was at the moment of death instead of, but I'm pretty sure he did write about ghosts, but as outside the individual being haunted. I'm thinking of The Raven, the poem, where it's all about the person being inside and hearing the raven or thinking about the raven and being frightened about the situation, right? So he was really into that, but he always wrote from the first person perspective. But his early biographers all tried to separate him from that, right? Even though he wrote in the first person, Edgar Allan Poe was not like this himself, right?
See, that's the publishers, that's other people trying to make money and money afterwards with him and continuing now today.
Right.
Which I'm going to just say as an astrologer, like, that's who he is. But that's the beauty of scorpionic aspects.
Right.
Is people try to deny their inner truth, especially Capricorn, because it wants to put on a good show and look the right part.
Right.
And not look like it's out of control. When the truth of Scorpio, its power is its authentic truth and power of nature, no matter how intense it is. And when a Scorpio brings that out, or a scorpionic vibe brings that out, that's where the power lies. Right? That's why it rules sex. That's why it rules, being naked. Right? That's why it rules all these things. Like, you have to learn to accept and receive what you've been given and use the power of what that is. When you deny that part of yourself, then, and you try to, you can't change it, right? Like, if you follow the Venus retrogrades always that happen in Scorpio every 8 years, right? And you look at people and you look at their evolution and their changes, like plastic surgery, stuff like that, is when Venus retrogrades usually in Scorpio, you'll see how people morph. Morphing is and people try to morph themselves or not be authentic in those periods. Like, whenever you're in a Venus retrograde in Scorpio, you're trying to morph something that's not authentic anymore. And we always see it in the world at those times, and you see it in your personal life. Those moments, to me, and you actually, for a moment there, actually go, oh, I can morph this. And you can't.
Would he have experienced any Venus retrogrades in
Well,
Scorpio?
yeah, I mean, every 8 years Venus retrograde in Scorpio.
Oh, so it would, okay.
But for him, it would have been powerful moments in his life in his first house, but also he's a Capricorn and the people that he associates with. So he definitely had great energy with Jupiter, Pluto, Moon, Venus, all in Pisces to trine that stuff. But it would be interesting to see in the history, which we're not going to do today, of course, but to look at the Venus retrogrades of Scorpio, if he is Scorpio rising, also because he has North Node there and he has Uranus there, and actually see what happened. And those are pivotal moments in his life.
Right. Yeah, and he had a lot of, weird situations with relationships ending, right? Whether it's death or his adopted father sort of just saying, that's it, like kicking him out and saying he's not paying for his debts anymore,
It's very Venus, Pluto, Moon, Jupiter. Square Neptune, square Saturn.
So then let's see if you think you can shed light on how he died then.
Yeah, so he what's the date of his death?
So his date of death was October 7th, I believe.
That's right on it. I'm already in my head. It's already, his sun is on his Mars, right?
Okay, so October 7th of 1849.
By the way, when we do this show, it's all, there's no script. I have no idea. We just show up and let's just see what's going on. So October 7th of 1949.
So he died on the 7th in the hospital. He was found passed out in a gutter with clothes on that weren't his own on October 3rd of 1849.
Okay, so I'm going to go to the 3rd. And then what city was he? New York, right, or something?
No, that was in Baltimore.
Oh, he was in Baltimore? No wonder Baltimore's never recovered. Sorry.
He's spent a lot of time
Sorry,
in
I didn't mean to go there.
Yeah.
You go to Maryland, you just don't look at Baltimore. You look at everything else. Maryland's one of the most beautiful states I've ever been to, but Baltimore?
It does have some issues, but it's a very cool city with lots of good history there.
I understand. I'm just saying, like, I'm in 2021, right? So it's like, you don't go through Baltimore. You always go, I'm going to stay on this highway, and I'm going to go towards the Chesapeake Bay.
And we've been to the Poe House Museum, and it wasn't the most fun place to try to visit, but it was a great location.
Was it very ghosty?
It actually was. I was just thinking, I believe that was one of the places where Maya, my daughter,
You're putting her through this show right now?
It's not Abraham Lincoln, so we're okay. She can handle it. But I believe it's a place where I know definitely my mom felt like she felt a ghost. And I think Maya, as a little girl, also thought she saw someone. So it is a pretty ghosty place. So it's worth the trip, I believe, if you care about those things.
Okay, so
October 3rd, 1849.
Yeah.
And I want to tell you, he was found in the gutter in someone else's clothes outside of a public house that was being used as a polling place because there was an election going on for the sheriff in Baltimore. So.
Right, and at that time, there was, if we're going to go into the history, right, there was claims of election fraud.
Right. So one of the theories about Edgar Allan Poe is that he was found that way because he had been kidnapped by a gang of people who were propagating election fraud. So there was this practice called cooping that was happening at that time, and it was known that it happened, where gangs who were sort of purchased by one political party or one candidate would kidnap people, make them wear disguises, and go into polling places and vote over and over again. Now, one of the things with the polling places at this time is after you voted as a reward, you were given alcohol. You were given a drink. Like, thank you for voting. Here's your drink.
God, sounds like lottery and get your drink for your shot today.
Your Krispy Kremes. So, yeah. So one of the theories is that he was caught up in one of these cooping gangs, and because he also seemed like he'd been beaten, and that he was brought in to this polling place and made to vote over and over again, and that he kept having to have the drinks, and then he passed out in the gutter. And he died then October 7th after somebody found him and recognized him. I think it was a person from the Baltimore Sun, from the newspaper, who found him and said, "That's Edgar Allan Poe," and, contacted somebody to come and help him. And they took him to the hospital where he later died.
If we could show the chart, Maya, of October 3rd, 1849 in Baltimore, Maryland, South Node Neptune conjunct in Pisces. And if we look at his chart, where his Pisces energy is, right? And you look at, it was all over his moon, Pluto, Venus, just those months prior, okay? The big thing about this chart is Pluto Uranus conjunction in Aries, 28 degrees Pluto squaring his sun, Uranus squaring his sun, Mercury, the moon in Aries on the 3rd, conjuncting Pluto Uranus, conjunct in Aries, Saturn in Aries. What a Aries fest. Saturn, Uranus, Pluto, South Node Neptune dead conjunct, North Node Venus and Jupiter. So all of the players on the nodes all over that big Pisces, in opposition to it, in conjunction to it, his sun, Pluto squaring it, Chiron in Scorpio, all over his Scorpio stuff, Mercury on his Uranus North Node conjunction.
Wow.
All right, so, yep. And the sun in Libra in the 12th on his Mars, and then Mars at 28 quincunx his sun, Mars sextile Pluto. That would have been yachting to him. So he would have been connecting a yod of the sextile of Mars and Pluto, which would have been a fated moment. And it would have been a moment for him with Pluto squaring it and with the South Node and Neptune conjunct. I am going to just say this because you brought up the criminal, what were the gangs called?
Cooping gangs.
Cooping gangs. Gosh,
Yeah.
it sounds, the Bloods and the Crips right now, you guys should be crippling in your graves and be all scared. Cooping gang.
Yep.
Um,
Well, they were pretty.
I know, I'm saying the
Violent,
Cooping gang. Don't fuck with
Yeah.
the Cooping gang. But I was going to say that I got a feeling that, and this might sound crazy, I don't know his stuff. But based off this, if I was reading his chart and I was looking at this, I'd be like, this guy lost everything and would do anything to, at this moment, no matter how crazy, and especially with Chiron in his first house. Chiron goes to Scorpio the fastest, through Libra and Scorpio the fastest. On the other side, like where we're at now, Chiron Aries, it's very slow. Chiron Pisces, very slow. Okay? So it's more intense for people who have Chiron in those signs, or when you go through those moments, if you're like a Libra or Scorpio and you have Chiron there, because it's Chiron's going through the intense aspect of a Chiron story of having to hold on shit you don't want to hold on to, and having to deal with just crap, and like having to like basically wait till the very end moment. It's a kind of Neptunian thing, but it's different. To finally like, oh, okay, I know how to be the guide now in life, and I know how to, a lot of people always go into the healing element of things, but really, I mean, it's the wound. And so he would have been extremely wounded, and he would have had nothing at this. I think he gambled away everything and lost it, and it was like the Cooping gang was like, you're going to help us commit fraud. And I don't think that he was going to do it. I think that he was a bigger talker than a walker, unless it was his own walk and his own talk for himself. And I think that he was obviously, with especially Pluto, Mars, you're dealing with thug, criminal, killing. He would have been killed. But not because he was being a good Samaritan author.
Right.
Because he was committing crimes and then he didn't want to do it himself. He was more of a pussy than a Cooping gang.
I mean, the other theories would be that he was beat up by somebody's husband.
No, it was the Cooping gang.
You think? And also there's so many things. Like, they even did a study with doctors in the 90s where they had doctors look at his symptoms that were reported in the hospital. And the doctor said it could have been rabies. But then if you look at the historical context and the area he was, people say, no, it wouldn't have been rabies. Like, he wouldn't have caught rabies there. And also they've looked at mercury poisoning because he was on some medication.
I was about to say, it feels like a Clinton takedown.
Possibly.
Cooping gang takedown.
So maybe the press who just happened to find him there actually paid the Cooping gang to get Edgar Allan Poe. Get him out of our, our way, please.
I mean, and they probably just took his opioid pills and some alcohol and just shoved it down his throat. And maybe the whole issue of like a husband or whatever, maybe they got a wife to give it to him and said, hey, I'm your third cousin.
And he said, that's super sexy, okay?
Oh, yeah, it's super. I'm not even kidding at this point. I'm not even kidding. With the South Node and Neptune there, you have to remember the election of 2016 with Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton was South Node Neptune in Pisces.
Really?
Correct. And what was it? It was the media saying, there's no way Trump's going to win. There's no way. It's impossible. And then it happened. So everything that's being said is a lie, you know what I mean? Especially in the press. So you can't even trust what the press reported at that time. Can't even trust it. It was a cover-up.
Interesting.
Because with the South Node Neptune conjunct, you have to remember at the same time, they were spying on Donald Trump's campaign, and it was paid for by Hillary Clinton in the dossier, and that's fact.
Funny.
That's fact, right? It's fact now.
Right.
Like, if you're denying that one, like, go look it up.
Yeah.
It was done in all the proceedings in the House and the Senate, and the investigations. So, especially for him, with that Chiron there, it's like he dealt with. That's why I asked who he would have been associated with.
Right.
Because based off Pluto-Uranus conjunction too, like we had a Pluto-Uranus square that we lived through, right? Just in 2012 through 2015. Pluto-Uranus conjunction with a South Node Neptune conjunction, and with him being a Capricorn and having Pluto square his sun and having Mars quincunx it in Gemini, and at the same time, you know, he's got Mars in the 12th and the sun's in his 12th house, and he's got Mercury and Chiron in the 1st, and it's all over his Uranus with Mercury. Like, he really was at the end of his rope, and I think didn't have the capacity to deliver in what he was supposed to do. And I think he got tied up in way too big of something way over his head.
Yeah, and he couldn't probably. I mean, he was coming back from Richmond where he'd been, maybe looking for another cousin, I don't know. And he was on his way to Philadelphia where he was supposed to help a woman edit her poems, or help edit a woman's
That
book
sounds
of
like
poems.
somebody at that time, if you're already that established, to go help somebody edit some poems, that feels like you're on Fiverr.com.
Right, so.
Right? Like, that'd be like, I mean, honestly, right? If you were like that well established and you're Edgar Allan Poe, and it's like, would you like think about that? Would you really?
Yeah, I mean, he needed the money. He needed the work.
And especially based off his Venus Pluto, like he needs it, and the South Node's on his Venus Pluto moon. Like he'll do it. So this is like, because it was October of 49, I would say if we go back to hit all of his stuff, this would have been going on. Wow, the Neptune South Node were exact all through that summer before that fall. I would have been saying that spring into the summer, because you would have had that South Node, Neptune, Mercury, and Saturn was also there in Pisces before it went into Aries. The spring of, because South Node would have been on his Pluto, was Moon conjunction, Venus conjunction, and Neptune would have been there, and it's a new thing that consciousness is awakening to. And also Lilith conjunct Chiron in his first house when Chiron went in retrograde, only the 1 year that Chiron, year and a half that Chiron's in Scorpio there. And then Jupiter in Leo coming into Virgo with the North Node, which Jupiter's at its detriment in Virgo. So I would have said that he would have lost it all already. And especially because Mars would have been in Aquarius in April. So going back one more month into March, Mars would have been into Capricorn in February. I would assume I would say as an astrologer that this was a buildup throughout that whole year that brought to that point. And of course, the most coercion that we can see using today's astrological data of South Node Neptune, that was the last time South Node and Neptune met, is when he died, compared to now, which was 2016.
That is
right?
crazy.
You can't
Wow.
find another time.
Yeah.
Right? Of an exact conjunction. So, and it deals with election and secrets around all that, and the press, and interlinkings, especially with publishers and authors and writers and what they're putting out and all that stuff. He would have been a rebel who also would have said to do that, maybe get the money, but probably would have been like, I'm not doing this. They probably would have had him do all these other things, and he said no. And that's why I'm using like the Clinton thing, because like, you know, a lot of people it's been proven now in 2015 and in 2016, even Obama and Biden spied on Trump, right? Like, and like the press just doesn't write about it.
Right.
They're not allowed to, or then you lose your job. Where it's like, he would have been like, I'm not going to do that, or I'm not. So really, he's not too much of a pussy, but he's like a pussy in how like he got involved, probably saw it. He's spiritually intuitive enough, but he also was like a desperado and a desperate person for what he needs. So, and he got played, and he didn't do it.
So do you think that it was alcohol, or was he drugged?
I think he was drugged up himself going into it. I think that they used that knowingly, and I think that again, it was an election for a sheriff.
Mm-hmm. You're not suggesting the sheriff might have been corrupt, are you?
No, I'm suggesting that, of course, the battle of who the sheriff was in the town, having a celebrity name die in the town with a mystery of a mysterious writer, adds to the quality of whoever at the time what you would want to do as an astrologer to help an investigator out is like, look at who was backing what sheriff and why, and who won that race, and who were the people connected to that, and if there was connections to Edgar Allan Poe and the sheriff that won, and that the people that were pushing for that sheriff, that's the people. And I bet you'll find the Cooper gang involved.
Yeah, I know that stuff is out there, right? Because I read an article about it. I should have gone back and looked at my notes from that. I wrote a post on this back when there was a transit that related in some way to this. So it's back on the Instagram feed if people want to look for it.
I think he was dead for days. I think he actually died on the 3rd.
That's interesting.
I think that they kept his body for a little bit.
And you know what?
To not know what was really going on, like with it.
Yeah, I wonder when the
especially it would have been fall of in Baltimore, and you know that's why I said maybe Edgar Allan Poe never should have entered into Baltimore, because this is kind of Baltimore shit.
Right, and it was known to be a highly contested election place, and this kind of stuff happened frequently there. So it was already
I would have, if I were to dissertate this chart, I would say, especially with the moon, Pluto conjunct in Aries at 28, South Node Neptune dead conjunct, Venus opposite that, the sun just moved to 10 degrees. It would have happened that morning, and that would have been when you went to go vote.
But I wonder even, so what happened?
Or maybe
with
go
these
to a meeting or something, and didn't go right, and they just threw him in the room and chomp on your pills.
Well, the Temperance Society president, or former president, who who reported on this was in the press, or trying to get his story out there, that no, he wouldn't have been drinking. He was definitely drugged. And they suppressed that story.
You know what I think of that society? I'm closing this. Because literally, that is just because they're trying to hold their own thing. That's why I said you can't trust the press or anybody putting out a press. With South Node Neptune, I did a whole Age of Deception 5-hour presentation in 2016 about the deceptive qualities of South Node Neptune and Pisces, that it was once since then. 1849 is also the same thing that made people believe in gold. It's the gold rush. 1849 is the staple year of the gold rush. I'm going to get gold. No, I'm going to get fucking what? Panhandled out, and I'm going to have claim jumpers? And really? A bunch of guys named brothers of Levi's? I'm just going there to get some Levi's?
Hey, that's a good legacy.
I know, but that's what I'm saying.
Poe's
Like, that was
work.
The gold.
Right.
Was the company Levi's that was created, that was like, well, all these people that came out here that are digging holes in these mountains looking for gold, this is what they need. And then all the claim jumpers out there went, yeah, it'd be a little more comfortable to watch these people get close to finding gold and be leaning down on the dirt and then be able to walk up and go claim jump them. Right. That at that time, everybody was completely not only drunk, but they were drunk on dreams that they thought were true. And also, people in America in 2016 were drunk on the high that Hillary Clinton was going to win. And fooled. Fool's gold. Right. So fooled.
Was it the same degree of Neptune when this happened?
It was close. It was like 9 degrees. So in 2016, if I'm correct. I'm going way off. Yeah, it was 9 degrees. So this was at 2 degrees. And also Neptune had just been found. So it's like Neptune's influence now for the first time on consciousness is coming through just within a year of it officially being a planet. And that was also found by a brewer who was a German brewer who was a drunk who used the brewery of alcohol to pay for his telescope, which is why Neptune rules alcohol. One of my favorite gifts from before gifts were gifts, when I was a young astrologer 15 years ago, that a Libra buddy of mine sent me. When he didn't believe in astrology, of course, so he sent me that. But he thought it was hilarious because it's a drunk screaming to God saying, "Fuck you, Neptune."
Well, that was good for that Libra.
And with him with too much of a stellium of Pisces there in the South Node and Neptune there. I mean, honestly, like he was probably already had lost it psychologically early on that 1849 and gambled it all away and also was on a manic high.
But it makes me wonder, even when the stories about him, like when did those stories start in the press? Was there a campaign to make him look crazy?
Neptune. He was going through Neptune square Neptune, and Neptune South Node was squaring his Saturn. And so when Neptune square Neptune comes and you're coming into your 40s, that is where you have to test if you are really on the spiritual path or not, or Neptune will just obliterate you. That's why people go through their midlife crisis, right? Is because Neptune squares Neptune right when you're coming in your 40s, and you're like, and then you come to your Uranus opposition, right? So like, he was going through Neptune square Neptune because he died young.
Yeah.
So he didn't even make it to his Uranus opposition. Uranus wasn't in Taurus yet. It was in Aries. So he was not... The reason why he didn't like transcendentalists, because he wasn't spiritual. He did not like God. He did not like any of that. And that test for him is very criminal-like, too, with Neptune square Neptune on secrets or doing things that you don't like. And he's got Pluto square Neptune. That's criminal activity. He was involved with some sort of criminal activity and was on the wrong side of it and was a weakling in that. That's where he was weak.
And all of this happened not too long before Bleeding Kansas.
Correct. Which, if you think of that moment in history, You've got California established in 1848. You've got not Oregon yet, not Washington yet. You are at a moment in history where the country's already being divided at that time.
Right.
It's not only being divided by people getting on wagon trains and going west, but it's being divided about slavery and abolitionists, and Uncle Tom's Cabin. The book comes out right at the beginning of that in the 1850s, right? Then you get the opposite books, right? Saying that, no, the white people are supposed to help slaves live a better life. So you're getting all this propaganda stuff. That's what Neptune and Pisces is, divisiveness to the media. We just saw it today as we were speaking today on July 13th of 2021. Joe Biden today did a speech talking about how we are on the brink of civil war in America. Now, if you walk down the street, nobody's going up to them, another American, and being like, fuck you, I hate you. Like, where's the Civil War? What the Civil War is the media and how it's divisive and how it's creating divisiveness. And at that time, when you get it at the beginning of a sign, you get it with the Neptune being found for the first time, and it's hitting his chart. In many ways, he is a test on that system that worked. And it also covers up election fraud. It makes people continue to go, well, how did he die? Well, maybe it was this. Maybe it was rabies. Maybe it was right? It's like, was Trump with really Russia? No, like the Steele dossier was bought and paid for by Hillary Clinton. She's the one who's connected to Russia. And then the Clinton Foundation, as Trump becomes president, closes up, never pays taxes, takes $20+ million. And you see the Clinton hangings, the signature everywhere of everybody connected to the Clinton Foundation that whoever tries to expose is a hanging. And in this case, you'd want to see how the Cooper gang, how they would do their outs.
I will have to look at that.
Which would be like, oh, he's just found out in the street.
Right. But you know what I have to say about literature from the literary perspective? It's interesting. It's like they get him out of the way. Like he was this weird anomaly of a writer who had this different style of literature, right? Where after his death, the whole transcendental thing in Emerson and Uncle Tom's Cabin and all these more moralistic types of writing come out. So to me, it almost makes me feel like that was, his voice had to be suppressed in a way, because even if he was a dysfunctional person and had lots of inner demons, he was writing from a new perspective that hadn't been considered to be an American voice, right?
Well, and America's too trying to find what is an American voice. What is the
American voice? And so they want to get him out of the way, kind of. I mean, if you look at it from that way of there being an attempt to get rid of him. But, I mean, and honestly, that could have been happening. It could have been sort of like, you go deal with that poet woman. Help her go get her poems together. And we're going to work on all these better, more moral types of books. So in a way.
Yeah, and maybe he didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you bring up, and I think it's a good way to close this, for people to think now about what's going on in our world today. Because if you think about the morality of what's coming out right now, right, that's what's being censored the most. And also, you have to remember at the time, there was a big opposition to that moral compass. And it wasn't until the end of Neptune and Pisces in 1858 when Lincoln runs for senator in Illinois and loses. But even though it was his loss, it was his moral conduct and character that brings him to face the same senator for the presidential election in 1860, as Neptune's at the end of Pisces coming into Aries, that he wins, and the moral compass wins. And the side that's not moral, that's been disgusting, that's been suppressing, that's been the media, that's been creating the firestorm the whole time, decides to create their own country, their own confederacy, and start a war. And so anybody wanting to see how this is working, you all think that, oh, the side right now that's the media is talking crap about is going to have to go and start its own thing. No, they are going to have to start their own thing, and they're going to lose, and that's what happens in history. Every time. The side that you think is winning with their demoralization of everything will be so demoralized themselves because of their facade, deception. It's all a story, and it's all a fake story, and you can't run that gamut and that gamble too long with Neptune and Pisces. It's a high that continues for them, but when you right now we're at 23 degrees in Neptune. We are entering into these waters of right before Lincoln ran and loses, but it was his speech and it was his conduct that stuck for those years. And you see that with Trump now. You can't deny it. I'm just trying to say, like, Trump right now gets 45,000 people at a rally right now, and people on the media go, look at the lies he says, and it's like at the same time, like, why are people listening to Lincoln? He lost.
Right. And I think another interesting aspect of, after hearing that, I'm thinking, so Edgar Allan Poe maybe wouldn't have been so troubled if he'd been alive at that later period of time, because he was really an outsider in the families in which he was raised and in society, right? And he's trying to make it in this society of reverends like Ralph Waldo Emerson, or, these really established great men and women who were the writers at the time. He's this weirdo, different guy, but also Abraham Lincoln was different and weird, right? He was the outsider. Everything about him,
also
he was very different.
Very depressed person.
And his photographs also, as Maya will attest, are kind of haunting. He did have sort of a haunting face. Well, and
he wrote in his diary, his personal diaries, he was depressed. He, before the Civil War.
Yeah.
He was dealing with that forever. So,
So it's almost like then the
but
triumphant moment
that's
for that
Edgar Allan Poe's
outsider.
issue is never his whole. I'm against transcendentalism. I'm against people like looking for more. At least Abraham Lincoln was the opposite of that.
He's like the combination of both sides coming together in a new way at that point.
And see, that's where if anybody is struggling in their life and they get too sadistic, because I would call it sadistic, you have to find that transcendental, which is transpersonal, which is transmutation, which is what Scorpio is about, into that you can't mutate something to the way that you want to sometimes, but you can mutate things through the transpersonal self and accepting who you are and seeing the benevolent energy, because there's a benevolent energy about Scorpio in every sign. There's a benevolent energy. And then there's a malefic about every sign. So, Mars and Pluto get malefic for Scorpio. But why is the end the transformation to a benevolent form of the rising of the phoenix? Whereas, like, you can take Leo and it might be great, but actually Leo's not really benevolent, right? Because it's the sun and it'll burn you. But you can take Sag, for example, which is the highest benevolent, right? Jupiter. You can believe in something so much, but get to the very end and get to the galactic center and be like, oh, fuck, like, is that really the belief that I'm going to take on I have responsibilities, and is it responsible belief to put that out there? Am I really putting out the right belief system? Has it been fact-checked? So there's a maleficent of how the Jesuits and the Pope did things and how they tried to stop,
That's a whole nother episode.
That's a whole other episode. But that's the interesting point, connecting Abraham Lincoln with Edgar Allan Poe and the difference. Edgar Allan Poe would have never been able to. He would have, but I don't think he. I think he had way too much intoxication within himself. But that's the beautiful work of his work is to. It was first person, and it is first person, and it is who he was. There is no blurring and trying to separate those two. They're the same.
Right, and he did in the end kind of disrupt his system.
He did.
You know, and so
And
to
it will
put
be
that,
a great.
that out there,
And
so
since
something else could emerge.
the modern day astrology is ruled by Uranus, the only way to solve this mystery is with astrology, with the North Node in Uranus and Scorpio that he has.
Well, and you just solved it.
That was an easy. That was easy. That was
Give you a hard
easy.
mystery?
No wonder I
Okay,
bought these
okay.
books. Just and you know what? I put them next to Emerson without even knowing that he wasn't into that, for some reason. And it's funny because it's like maybe they're both learning a little bit from each other. There's that shadow we have to like live within our life, and that light. And if you don't do both work, then you're not doing this work in life.
You know, I'm all about that.
I know.
I'm a total Libra.
A
I
Libra.
love the dark and the light coming together.
Especially, you got some you got the Venus in Scorpio.
But it's
Yeah.
that's the American way. That's why we can't suppress one side.
No.
Right?
No.
Because it takes both to create
Correct.
whatever is our future.
And it's not even, you know what, the suppression is not so much on the outside, it's the people within a nation that choose to suppress themselves and suppress what they see and not want to take it and not want to face it. Well, it was great to have you on.
This was so fun. Can't wait
It's
to
your
do another
show.
one.
I'm
Is it?
trying to, this is Ann's show.
But people are tuning in to see you.
No, they love you.
we're having
Last
a
ones we did, they're like,
conversation.
make sure she talks more. I'm like, I know I need to do that.
I feel like I talked a lot this time.
Of course, because I don't
conversation.
have the history on this.
Yeah. So, well, thank you for getting those books. This was fun.
Yeah, we got a lot more books to go through and a lot more history to bring you here. Make sure that you join highvibe.tv, of course, our apps, or just go to highvibe.tv, or if you're on Apple, Android, or Apple TV, or Roku, you can sign up right through there. So we appreciate it. We do awesome content every day, and we've got, I think it's seven talent doing videos on the network now all the time, and we have other talent all the time. So
Yeah.
appreciate it, Ann. Appreciate you all, and we'll see you on the next History in the Stars.